Between floating kingdoms and seas of dense mist, Kalen Vaymar wandered through the ruins of Skirich, a place where time seemed to have stopped. The cracked pillars rose through the fog like the bones of a giant buried under forgotten eras. The silence weighed heavily in the air, broken only by the distant echo of rusted chains swaying in the wind. Each step Kalen took sunk into the ancient dust, as if the ground held memories of a lost age. His gray eyes reflected the pale light, while visions of the inverted abyss haunted his mind. Fragments of forgotten prophecies whispered his name in the shadows, like echoes that never quite faded. Night fell slowly, painting the sky in faded purple hues, when the shadows began to move in the mist. Distorted creatures emerged, their shapeless forms twisting as if made of darkness itself. Kalen shrank behind a broken column, feeling the weight of the curse he carried in his chest. The heart of the abyss pulsed under his skin, an invisible mark that attracted the things that hunted in the dark. His fingers clenched around the rusted blade strapped to his waist, knowing full well that ordinary weapons wouldn't do much against those entities. The cold cut through his skin, but the real ice came from within. The voices of the abyss whispered inside his mind, promising power, freedom, and damnation. He pressed his temples, trying to push the echoes away. He couldn't lose himself. Not now. Not when each night he survived brought him closer to uncovering the truth about who he was, and what awaited him in the depths. That's when the sound of footsteps echoed through the ruins. Kalen spun around, the blade trembling in his hands. From the mist emerged a figure, half hidden in the gloom. Naira Ashen stepped out from the shadows, her golden eyes glowing like smoldering embers. Her pale skin was marked with scars that told stories she never shared. The hybrid carried a crossbow on her back and 2 daggers strapped to her hips, moving with the precision of someone who had learned to survive in a world that offered no mercy. Naira's eyes met his for a moment, and in them was something broken, something Kalen recognized. 2 damned souls walking the fine line between redemption and oblivion. Without a word exchanged, the two began to move through the ruins, their footsteps echoing in the forgotten vastness. The mist seemed to whisper around them, carrying secrets buried under layers of time. The night dragged on, and the silence felt heavier with every step. Kalen felt the heart of the abyss beat louder, as if something in the depths was waking up. Naira walked beside him, her eyes always alert, as though the world around them could collapse at any moment. They didn't know where they were going, just that they needed to keep moving. Each step took them deeper into the mist, closer to whatever was watching them from the shadows. When they stopped to rest amidst the ruins, Kalen stared at the dark sky above. The stars seemed to be dimmed, as if the very heavens feared what hid in the hidden dimension. Naira remained silent, but her golden eyes never stopped scanning the fog. Neither of them knew what awaited them on their journey, only that the echoes were getting louder. The cold grew more intense, and Kalen felt as if the ruin itself was alive, breathing in silence. The secrets buried there seemed to be calling him, pulling him toward something older than any of them. The abyss was near, and he knew that what watched them from the shadows hadn't shown its true face yet. The night moved on slowly, and the visions began to return. Fragments of memories that weren't his danced behind his eyes, temples collapsing, a seal breaking, and a name whispered in the depths. His name. Kalen closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of everything he still didn't understand. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse to be alive in this place, but whatever was in the mist, it was waiting for him. When the first pale light of dawn began to tint the horizon, Kalen felt something shift in the air. The echoes seemed farther away, but they hadn't disappeared. They were just waiting, whispering in the spaces between reality itself. The heart of the abyss pulsed beneath his skin, a silent reminder that his destiny had already been written. Even if he still didn't know how the story ended. Kalen stood up slowly, casting one last glance at the ruins around him. Naira adjusted the straps of her crossbow on her back, saying nothing. The road ahead was unknown, shrouded in the same mist that had haunted them from the beginning. They moved forward, never looking back. While deep within, something kept whispering their names. What they didn't know yet was that every step brought them closer to the hidden truth between the layers of the sky, and that something was watching them, always lurking, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The sun was still low on the horizon when Kalen and Naira reached the edges of Iron City, a fortress forgotten by time and corrupted by war. The twisted iron walls seemed to absorb all light around them, reflecting only a landscape of desolation. The flames dancing in the city's forges cast long, distorted shadows, as if the city itself was breathing with a life that didn't belong to it. The mist, still thick, snaked between the abandoned buildings, bringing with it a metallic, acidic smell like the very air was toxic. "I never thought I'd be back here," Naira murmured, her voice carrying a subtle bitterness, as if she was talking about a place that had been lost long before she was even born. Kalen knew his story was tied to those walls, but Naira's words bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. The city felt alive, like it remembered the horrors that had happened there. As they got closer to the iron gates that guarded the city's entrance, the sound of chains dragging on the ground echoed down the empty street. Kalen and Naira exchanged a look, and he felt a growing pressure in his chest. Something was wrong. The silence was too deep to be natural. They moved forward, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that covered everything. Kalen couldn't stop staring at the buildings around them, their walls seeming to scream with the weight of the past. He knew he shouldn't let those impressions get to him, but something deep inside his soul told him that the shadows of Skirich and those of Iron were sisters born from the same ruinous force that had been chasing him. "Watch out, Kalen," Naira said, breaking the tense silence. Her eyes were fixed ahead, alert for any movement. "We're not alone here." Kalen felt a wave of energy pass through his body, a shiver that made him feel more vulnerable than he had ever felt before. He could feel the weight of the heart of the abyss, as if the object had developed a will of its own, pulling him into the city. Each step felt harder than the last, like the air was charged with an invisible force trying to keep them from moving forward. Then, amidst the piercing silence, the sound of footsteps began to join theirs. Slowly, like a rising whisper, as if the city's walls were starting to move. The mist thickened, obscuring the outlines of the buildings even more. Kalen stopped. His hand went to the blade, but a stronger premonition stopped him from drawing the sword. He needed to know who or what was behind him. "They're here," Naira said with an unsettling calm, but Kalen noticed the tension in her shoulders. "The hunters." Before Kalen could respond, a figure materialized in the mist ahead of them. It was tall, wearing a dark cloak, the hood partially covering its face. The figure moved in slow, almost ceremonial steps, like it was waiting for Kalen and Naira to see it. The voice was low, almost a whisper laced with threats. "The heart of the abyss. Finally you reveal yourself, Kalen Vaymar." Kalen's name echoed like a distorted sound in his mind. It wasn't the first time he had heard it, but the voice was different. This voice carried a presence, a cold authority that he recognized, though he had never felt it directly. The hunter was here for a reason. They had drawn the attention of the forces that had been chasing them. "You're with them," the figure continued, pointing at Naira with a subtle but precise gesture. "You know what this means, don't you?" Naira didn't answer. Her golden eyes glowed, and Kalen knew she was bracing herself for the worst. He could feel the tension between them, the sense that they were about to be dragged into something much bigger than either of them could control. The figure in front of them started to approach slowly. The cloak floated in the wind like a black shadow, and its eyes deep red like old blood glowed with a silent ferocity. Kalen could feel the pressure building in the air, as if something was about to tear through the very fabric of reality. "I don't have time for your empty words," Kalen said, his lips curling into a sneer, trying to hide the fear burning in his chest. "If you're here to hunt us, then just come already." The figure stopped. The silence stretched for an endless few seconds before the hunter's voice rose again. "You don't understand, Kalen. You don't understand what's at stake. What you carry, what you are. This isn't about choices anymore. It's about destiny." The words were heavy with a weight Kalen couldn't process right away. "Destiny?" Kalen repeated, more to himself than to the hunter. He was starting to realize that even though he had been seeking answers, they were now being forced upon him. He couldn't avoid it, no matter what. The heart of the abyss was becoming the key to a game he didn't choose to play. Suddenly, a burst of light illuminated the city around them, and Kalen was pushed back. The shadows began to move, forming humanoid shapes that seemed to melt into the mist, like the city itself rising to attack. Chaos had begun. "Come on, Naira," Kalen yelled, running toward her, feeling the mist tightening his breath. "Now or we're gonna be lost here." The hybrid didn't hesitate. Her movements were quick and precise, every step taken with deadly intent. They turned and moved in the opposite direction, but the shadows followed, an unrelenting tide that left no room for escape. Kalen knew that, once again, fate was leading them down a path with no return. But he also knew something else. If there was any chance to change the course of this journey, he had to face it head-on. The heart of the abyss was still pulsing hard, like it was telling him that the battle was just beginning. The distant scream of the hunter forces echoed through the streets of Pharaoh, reverberating through the ruins like a reminder of forgotten times. Kalen and Naira didn't waste any time. They knew that their fate was tied to those ruins, to the legacy the city hid deep in its history. Every empty street, every crumbling building, carried with it a piece of what they needed to find. The battle had started, but the real challenge was to unearth the secrets waiting in the darkness. Kalen couldn't deny that something inside him stirred with every step he took. The heart of the abyss seemed to intensify the feeling, pulsing like a live flame in his chest. He felt like he was being guided, as if the city was drawing an invisible map in his mind, pointing out the next steps. But what was there in the shadows waiting for him? Naira by his side kept her senses sharp. Her golden eyes were always alert to every movement around them, every sound that cut through the heavy air of the city. She felt the same as Kalen, a growing pressure like the city itself was alive and watching them. And deep down she knew the hunters weren't just after them. They were after what Kalen carried, and they knew the time for the heart of the abyss to be revealed had finally come. "Kalen, we need to move fast," Naira said, her voice full of urgency. "If the hunters made it this far, then the others, the ones following us, can't be far behind." He nodded, understanding. Naira's tension didn't go unnoticed. She wasn't just worried, she was scared. And Kalen didn't blame her. What they were facing was way bigger than either of them had imagined. They were dealing with forces that were beyond human understanding, forces tied to a forgotten legacy. They moved through a winding path, where the shadows seemed to grow with every step. Every corner was a trap in disguise, and the ruins around them were filled with echoes of a long-lost era. The walls, still covered in ancient inscriptions, spoke of a time when the people of Pharaoh were known for their strength and wisdom, but also for their inevitable fall. What was left of the city seemed like a broken mirror, reflecting a corrupted past. These inscriptions. Kalen began, stopping in front of one of the walls adorned with ancient symbols. They're talking about more than just the city's history. This is a warning. Naira approached, her fingers sliding over the worn stones, tracing the engraved marks. They knew Kalen. They knew something was coming. Something that would destroy everything they knew. The wind blew strong, lifting a fine dust that danced in the air between the ruins. Kalen felt the weight of those words. If the ancients knew destruction was coming, what did that mean for him now? The heart of the abyss wasn't just a relic of power. It was the key to something bigger, and that key had been forged in the same land that was about to be consumed. They kept going, following the clues left in the ruins. The path led them to a central square, where a giant iron statue stood in the middle, an imposing figure with a sword pointed to the sky, like it was challenging the gods. Around it, the ground was covered with a tangle of roots, and the vegetation seemed to have claimed the space, as if the city was trying to recover what had been taken from it. But the trees and plants had a sickly, distorted look, as if something had corrupted them. On top of the statue, Naira said with growing unease in her voice, "What do you think they're trying to hide?" Kalen looked up and saw what she was pointing at. At the top of the statue, in a hidden opening, there was something glowing faintly like a distant light. The glow seemed inviting but also dangerous. That light could be the key to unraveling everything, or the trap the hunters had set. But he had no choice. The heart of the abyss burned with purpose, and he knew he had to keep going no matter what he'd find. "Let's climb," Kalen said, determination in his voice. "The answer's up there." They scaled the slippery stones, each movement made carefully. The wind howled around them as if the city itself was trying to stop them from reaching the top. But Kalen couldn't turn back now. There was something much bigger at play, something he didn't fully understand yet, but that was starting to reveal itself in a way that felt unsettling. When they finally made it to the top, what they saw made their hearts race. In the center of the opening, a crystal sphere was positioned carefully, radiating light that grew stronger the closer they got. The sphere seemed to pulse as if it had a life of its own. Kalen reached out, hand trembling, and when his fingers touched the crystal, a surge of energy shot through him, warping his vision. Images started flashing in front of his eyes. A city on fire, ruins collapsing, and a dark figure rising on the horizon. a shadow spreading like ink, swallowing everything in its path. The face of that figure was indistinct, but Kalen felt an instant connection to it. Something about this presence made him feel like he was looking at something he knew deeply, something inextricably tied to him. Naira yanked him back, but he was frozen by the vision. The crystal seemed to be transmitting a message, a vision of what was to come. And Kalen knew there was no running from it. The legacy of the ruins wasn't just an old story, it was the future. And he was at the center of it, the heart of the abyss finally waking up, with the world's fate resting on his choices. The glow from the crystal sphere still lit the square, but its brightness was slowly fading, as if it was losing power. Kalen felt the weight of this transition, like the vision he just had was only the beginning of something much darker. As he and Naira stepped away from the statue, a cold sensation enveloped them, and the air felt thicker, heavy with a rising pressure. Something was coming. The shadows, which had stayed still until now, began to stir in an unsettling way. "Kalen, something's wrong?" Naira whispered, her voice low, as if she feared the shadows themselves might hear her. She looked around, her eyes fixed on the walls of the ruins, on the trees that now seemed to move on their own. "We can't stay here much longer." Kalen nodded, a chill running down his spine. He didn't know if it was the heart of the abyss, the visions, or the environment around them, but one thing was clear. The city, which had once seemed silent, was now alive, watching them. They were no longer alone. The first shadow appeared as the dark mist rose from the streets. It was a hooded figure, with a black cloak floating behind it, moving without the wind. Kalen couldn't see its face, but he felt an overwhelming presence that seemed to cut through the very air. This shadow wasn't alone. Others began to materialize around the square, moving like they were emerging from the earth itself, as if they were extensions of the ruins, beings made of pure darkness. "The hunters?" Kalen muttered, his hand instinctively going to the blade at his waist. But his expression was grim. He knew these weren't just hunters. They were something more, something ancient and relentless. Naira braced herself to fight by his side, but the presence of the shadows was almost crushing. They were waiting, watching with a patience that made time feel like it was dragging toward an inevitable end. Kalen could see the outlines of their figures, but something about them wasn't right. They weren't just humans or even beasts. They were fragments of the night itself, specters that existed beyond the reach of light. "We can't stay here, Kalen. We need to find a safe place and fast." Before he could respond, one of the shadows moved quickly toward them, almost as if it had materialized out of thin air. Naira dodged nimbly, but Kalen was slower, and the shadow closed in, its presence as cold as death. That's when Kalen felt a sharp pain slice through his mind, as if the heart of the abyss was reacting to this force. The crystal inside him seemed to pulse, and a wave of power he couldn't understand flooded his body. He shuddered, and with a primal scream, the energy the heart of the abyss unleashed exploded in a beam of white light that dispersed the nearest shadows. But the force didn't last long, and soon the shadows started to regroup, like they were just waiting for the right moment to strike again. Kalen could feel his strength slipping away. He had no idea how much longer he could keep going. "Kalen, we gotta move," Naira shouted, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the deeper ruins of the city. They knew they couldn't face those creatures head-on, not yet. The power of the heart of the abyss, as strong as it was, didn't seem enough to take them down. But what else could they do? As they moved through the narrow streets, Kalen glanced back and saw the shadows following them, moving with a supernatural speed. They seemed smarter than he'd thought, almost like they knew exactly where they were going, like they had one goal: capture them. "We can't keep running," Kalen said, panting as they moved further away from the central square. "We need to figure out what's going on." But Naira shook her head, looking around. "We're being hunted, Kalen. We can't stay here. If we do, the city will be our prison." Kalen knew she was right. The shadows were starting to close in, and the feeling of desperation was growing with every passing second. But at the same time, he felt like this confrontation wasn't random. Something inside him was screaming to face the shadows, to figure out what they wanted. There was more to this, some hidden truth, and he couldn't let it get lost in the dark. "We're stopping running," Kalen said, turning to face the approaching shadows. Naira looked at him, surprised, but she knew what he meant. She knew that, at that moment, Kalen wasn't running anymore. He was ready to face whatever it took to uncover the secrets hidden here. And even knowing it could mean a huge sacrifice, she was willing to stand by him. The shadows closed in and Kalen braced himself for a fight. He could feel the power of the heart of the abyss growing inside him, stronger than before. The shadows paused for a second, like they recognized the threat he posed, but soon they started moving again, like a coordinated mass of darkness. That's when Kalen understood. The shadows weren't just some common enemy. They were the reflection of the darkness that was waking up, a force that wanted to control the heart of the abyss, that wanted to destroy it before it could be used. And somehow he knew this battle was just the beginning. The city was in ruins, but in its destruction, Kalen felt a force calling him, a power that was starting to reveal itself uncontrollably. The shadows kept closing in, but he knew it wasn't time to run anymore. The fight was inevitable now, and as exhausted as his body was, something inside him burned with an unknown intensity. The heart of the abyss pulsed stronger, like it could sense the final battle was near. "Kalen, we can't wait any longer," Naira said, her voice low. She was out of breath, but her eyes were steady. She knew this moment was crucial. The fear she felt wasn't an option anymore. "We need to face this now. Together." Kalen looked at her, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. It wasn't just him fighting. Naira was by his side, with the same determination in her eyes. They had come this far, and now it was time to face the truth about what was really going on. The shadows started moving faster, a deadly dance, like they were getting ready for a final attack. They knew Kalen was about to unlock the true power of the heart of the abyss. But he didn't hesitate. The energy he felt now wasn't just from some magical gem. It was something deeper, something ancient. He was beginning to understand what the city represented, what the shadows really were. They weren't just enemies. They were fragments of a much greater power, a power he was destined to control. "I won't let you destroy us," Kalen shouted, with a strength that surprised even him. He felt the power of the heart of the abyss focus in his hands, a dark yet luminous energy, ready to explode in a wave of destruction. The shadows hesitated for a moment, but soon charged at him with renewed fury. But Kalen was ready. He raised his hands, and with a cry of pure will, the power of the heart of the abyss spread out, flooding the city with a black light that seemed to consume the shadows themselves. Every specter that came near him was swallowed by the energy, vanishing into the dark. But as the energy expanded, Kalen felt the pain of his own body being consumed. The price of power was being paid, but he couldn't stop now. Naira, seeing the sacrifice he was about to make, rushed to him. "Kalen, you can't give yourself up completely. Not like this." But Kalen already knew what he had to do. He couldn't lose control. He needed to use the energy from the heart of the abyss to seal the shadows, to restore balance to the city and the world. The sacrifice was necessary, and he was ready. "It's the only way," he whispered to Naira, a sad smile on his face. "The last key to unlock fate." With one final move, he channeled all the energy of the heart of the abyss, feeling his life fading as he unleashed the last force against the shadows. The world around him seemed to collapse, and the shadows began to dissipate, consumed by the energy. But Kalen knew this power couldn't be held for long. He was about to succumb. Naira, desperate, tried to reach for his hand but was stopped by the wave of energy now taking over the field. "Kalen, no." She screamed, but her words were lost in the explosion of light. The heart of the abyss pulsed with such force it seemed to swallow everything around it, leaving behind a deep silence. When the light finally calmed down, the city was different. The shadows were gone, but the price Kalen had paid was clear. He lay on the ground, his body drained by the power he had released. Naira rushed to him, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. "Kalen," she whispered, tears in her eyes. But to her surprise, he was still alive. His body was wounded, but the light that radiated from his heart hadn't disappeared. He slowly opened his eyes, his gaze weak but determined. "I did it. The legacy, it's safe." Naira looked at him with a forced smile, her voice faltering. "You don't have to do anything else. It's time to rest now." Kalen smiled slightly, his words a promise. "The legacy will continue. But I need time. The heart is still in me. I need to learn how to control it." Naira nodded, her heart filled with both hope and sadness. She knew that even though Kalen's sacrifice had been great, it hadn't been in vain. He hadn't just defeated the shadows. He had unlocked his true destiny. They didn't know what the future would bring, but at that moment, one thing was clear. The war against the shadows was over, but the real journey was just beginning. The heart of the abyss still pulsed within Kalen, and with it, a new hope for the world. Kalen was exhausted, but there was something different in his expression. The world around him, once shrouded in darkness, now breathed a new life. The city's ruins, the shadows, and the echoes of the old battle began to fade. The sacrifice had been immense, but the weight of what he had achieved was even greater. Naira gazed at the sky, now opening up to a horizon of vibrant colors, the light of dawn bringing a sense of renewal. The heart of the abyss, though still pulsing within Kalen, was no longer a threat. It was a key, a force he would learn to master, now a part of him. What happens now? Naira asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper. She looked at Kalen, who, though weakened, seemed more at peace than ever. He knew his journey wasn't over yet. The fight against the shadows had ended, but the real test was yet to come. It wasn't just about defeating external enemies, but about controlling the power that now resided within him. Now Kalen began, his voice hoarse but firm, it's time to rebuild. Not just the city but trust, truth. The legacy of the Guardians is reborn. We can't let the shadows return. We must be the beacons for what's to come. He struggled to his feet, the pain of his journey still very present, but there was something in his eyes that couldn't be ignored. He was determined. And by his side, Naira knew she wasn't alone. Together, they would rebuild what had been destroyed, facing the challenges that destiny still had in store. Their story, the legacy of the Guardians, would be told for generations. The heart of the abyss may have been the key to power, but it was the sacrifice, the courage, and the hope that truly sealed Kalen's fate and everyone around him. And so, as the sun finally rose on the horizon, bringing a new era, Kalen and Naira knew that the real work was just beginning. The world, though scarred by war and loss, still had a chance. And with their union, the promise of the legacy of the Guardians would become reality. A new cycle was about to begin. This is the end of another chapter in Kalen's journey. But as always, the story doesn't end here. The world is vast, the forces shaping fate are still in motion. The future is uncertain, but as Kalen learned, every step is a chance to be reborn. And with each new dawn, the legacy of the Guardians will continue to guide those who have the courage to move forward. If you like this story, don't forget to leave your comment, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. See you in the next video.